Well, I reckon we kick off because I am, as you know, Darryl, I like to run things to time and
That's
run
it.
them efficiently. I always think of, when I think of you, I start giggling about my to the point emails. They might be slightly long, but there's always points in there and trying to get in there. So welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening. I'm extremely honoured to have, as it was the last time we had you on, you actually got coined a name. You're Principal Darryl. So in the feedback we heard Principal Darryl. But in all seriousness, I'm really excited to be here with you this evening, Darryl, who I'll introduce in just a moment. I just quickly, while you're settling in and people are still arriving, I just like to do an acknowledgement of country. And we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. Before I introduce you, Darryl, what I might do is just go over a couple of little things. This is a really interactive session. So, Darryl, thank you for volunteering and donating your time in an evening on a Tuesday night, a rainy Tuesday night here in Sydney. Um, for those of you that are in the webinar and participating, please pop in questions into the chat box. So we have staff that are there. This is for you. You know, I always like to acknowledge that you've all had a big day, you've been at work and you've turned up and you've got questions. Please pop them in. If we can't get to the questions, we do keep them and we will respond to you, or the team will respond to you tomorrow. Also, we will be um, popping out a recording that you can share widely if you wish to, if you want to invite your team in, or if you have to leave early, this recording will be sent out to you probably by the end of tomorrow. So just keep a little eye out for it. The other thing is, towards the end of the session, there will be a survey. It's just a couple of minutes. As you probably know, we run a lot of sessions and a lot of webinars, and they're directed from things and areas and focuses of you as educators, what you're looking to find out more about, or how we can further continue to support you. One of the big ethos that we have at Life Skills Go is to really build connections and also to begin to build community. Like your school, Darryl, is incredible human beings working in there doing fantastic things. And yet often that doesn't get shared with other schools and other networks. So we've seen the power of when community comes together and when you meet new people or you reach out to them, being able to knowledge share it and share your own best practices, because schools are individuals, but there might be things that you're doing that might be of benefit to another school. My name's Nikki Bonus and I am the founder of Life Skills Go. I'm not going to read my bio. Um, I think for me, one of the really important things whenever we're looking at Life Skills Go or we're presenting anything is the why behind what we do. And, for me, I'm very, very clear that we exist to ensure that no child falls through the gaps. And we're going to talk about data, we're going to talk about emotional literacy, we're going to talk about teachers, we're going to talk about roles within the school. And yet, at the end of the day, the number one thing about schools is relationships, and also ensuring that our young people are supported, our teachers are supported, and those relationships and building connection is really critical for creating a learning environment. Within that, we saw that the current system of how we measure a young person or a school's wellbeing is often done through attendance, behaviour, observations, teachers' observation, and it's really lacking timely, real-time reports or metrics and trends to be able to not only see a young person for more than their behaviour, but also how do we begin to, over time, longitudinally, watch for any trends or watch for any patterns. We know that wellbeing is not like any other KLA. We can't just keep putting more and more work into our young people. Life happens, and we want to ensure that we catch our little people before they fall, or as we all know, at times of points in need, or just to have a wraparound to be able to measure our wellbeing programs and the incredible work that people do in schools. So for the main event, I'm going to introduce Principal Darryl. I'm not going to read off his bio, but I am going to share a personal experience, if that's okay with you, Darryl. I had the privilege of visiting your school, and one of the things that really stood out for me was not only, there's this whole thing about being visible, for you being visible, but not. What really stood out for me was the level of trust that the young people had in you and also your staff had in you. And I thought that was a really, it's a very vibrant, very colorful. There's a lot happening out in your community, and I'm sure that we'll unpack that. But being able to spend time with all of your classes and also all of your staff, a really big thing for me was the strength of your community. So rather than reading off your bio, just wondering, what's one thing that sustains you when, education, you've been around nearly 40 years. What keeps you getting out of bed every morning, even when you get those moments of absolute fatigue? What's something that motivates you?
Yeah, it's funny because some of the questions that we've sort of talked over around this, especially around well-being, like it's really funny. People laugh a little bit at me, but I can't ever remembering not really wanting to go to school.
Mm, mm,
So I suppose as a leader in schools, that's sort of been my mantra is making sure that the experience the kids have is sort of the most enjoyable part of their day. And like I've been at Wellington for 20 years on and off now, so that sort of longevity and continuity allows for a lot of that to happen. It gets a little bit scary because I think I'm up to about third generation of families that I've been working with. So I'm meeting, well, for example, one of my staff was one of the first students at our preschool in 2005. So this week, I'm having a conversation with him about how he applies for paternity leave when his newborn comes along in a couple of weeks' time or months' time. So, and then like again, his dad today is the bus driver, so he
mm.
drives one of our town-run buses, so he's there having a chat around kids that are so. Um, uh, and the hardest thing really for me in my job is I actually live in Dubbo, which is about 50 kilometres away from Wellington. So not being a local has been a thing I've dealt with all the time, but just the energy that comes from the community and how they've sort of embraced me and how that's sort of a reciprocal relationship because I say to people it's probably the best job I've ever had, and it's that energy that's created. And um, I think the hardest thing as a leader is you don't let your ego drive things, but you've got to try and sit back and sort of listen to people. My wife mightn't say this, but I think being able to listen, and I think where it's exciting working with you guys, from the guys from Life Skills Go, is a lot of that, like there's similar sort of narrative around that sort of
Mm.
stuff. And the most powerful thing you can have as a leader is that real-time data to find out where kids are at the time. And like Nikki and I had been reflecting on some of the statewide data that they're collecting, and it's sort of de-identified, it's generic, it happens once a year. And what's really excited me about the work that we're doing at the moment is where we're sort of I think we've got a really good finger on our pulse of our community, but this allows us that other dimension that we probably haven't been picking up for quite a while. So
Mm.
um, yeah, I get out of bed because like I'm a secondary trained HSIE teacher, so I was trained to teach geography and economics to HSC kids. But um, when I applied for, I'd been doing a lot of work in the literacy space. So when I applied for the job at Wellington, it was sort of around the time of all the literacy syllabus documents are changing. We're doing lots of work around that. And I spent a bit of time working with the Disadvantaged Schools program. Um, and last time I was like winding back the clock, taught up with a lovely lady called Di Giblin, who I'd worked with back in those days. And I think it's that passion for equity and what equity really means. And I know I'm getting old now because I question a lot about where the Department of Education in New South Wales is sort of heading with that because I think we've lost a little bit of that focus. But again, the hands are really like a lot of that resource is in the hands of principals, so we really need to support them in terms of doing the best that they can with their resources. So that, yeah, I just love it. I've only got a couple of years to go. I'm much older than I look, but so yeah, just really racing to the finish line and the energy that I get from school and our amazing staff and kids and community is part of it.
Could you give us just a snapshot of the context of your school and sort of, the things that you see, and yeah, just sort of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Dubbo's only 50. Oh, Wellington's only 50 k's from Dubbo, but it could be just as well out in the middle of nowhere or a long way away because um, there's a lot of stereotypes around the town. It has two jails just on the outskirts of town, which are often seen in a negative way, but I really think they've been a real boon for the town because we're a small town with about 5,000 people, and we have Coles, Woolworths, McDonald's, KFC, all those sorts of things. But we also, the health services in town were all upgraded when that happened. And then, um, so, and I say to people, when I first arrived there, it's actually, well, I think it's still be close to that. It's the eighth poorest postcode in New South Wales. So we got, when you look at a lot of the data there, 69% of our kids are in the bottom quartile of the all the ICSIA measures and stuff like that. And there's lots of issues to do with small towns, those types of things. But the energy that comes from the balance between our rural um, community and the town community, and um, Twiggy Forest is putting 130 wind turbines on the edge of town at the moment. So it's the centre of a renewable energy zone, which is bringing a training centre and a whole lot of other things. Because I suppose as a secondary teacher in a primary school, it gets frustrating when you build all those foundations and the kids are all set up and ready to go, and then the wheels sort of fall off in a secondary context. So what's happening in Wellington at the moment from an economic sense, I think, is really, really positive because a lot of the kids are going to get jobs and those types of things. Um, but but my whole philosophy has been around that balance. So one of the questions was, my whole view of well-being, and I think the Department of Education in New South Wales got that a little bit wrong as well because it's about staff and student well-being and how that works together. You cannot look at student well-being and staff well-being separately, because um, obviously a happy staff create really positive well-being, a positive well-being environment for kids, and then that translates into your community. So we've really attacked that. I was lucky the year that I started in 2005, we had a preschool built on site, located on site. So um, being able to get into the community from an educational point of view with the kids at 4 years of age, and then obviously you're doing a lot of work with the preschools with the 3-year-old kids. We've really seen a real growth in academic outcomes for kids since in that last 20 years, which has been really amazing. So, um, I'm sort of proud of that because for the last 2 years we've been in the top 50 schools they have a list of schools making a difference. So it's really value added through NAPLAN. So um, to be able to look at our socioeconomic context and um, working with the whole well-being aspect of our school and that translating into academic outcomes is, I suppose, what it's really all about, bringing all that stuff together.
Very left of center question here, but given I can now visualize your community and the complexity and the colorfulness, and it's a large, very dynamic school. How do you not burn out? I suppose and I'll give some context to that. I loved what you were saying right at the beginning around, you've never not wanted to go to school. And how do you make sure that you take care of yourself?
Um,
There's a
yeah,
very left of center, but I think it's a very
yeah, it is
complex
important.
community. But
Mm,
it's a complex community. You have a lot happening on a minutely basis in that school, and
mm.
yet it works. You've been there, on and off for 20 years. That's a long time. You don't have to answer that question, but I was genuinely curious about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's part of my personality. I tend to not really take a lot to heart. I do like I think driving away and not being in community has been part of that because like I'm still a pretty active sports person, so I still
Mm.
play cricket and I referee rugby and stay pretty active and have a sort of a whole lot of other activities. My wife's not a teacher, so it's good to get away from school and not talk about shop all the time, I suppose. So I think it's a balance of those sort of things which um, create that. And I suppose I've been lucky. I place a big emphasis on the interpersonal sort of stuff. So I think again, making sure that everybody's on the same page, you're honest with people. And yet, like if I'm being really honest, this week we've had tears.
Mm,
We've had people who are feeling under pressure because of the biggest pressure at the
mm,
moment on principals is really around staffing. And whenever you've got staffing shortages, there's always an issue with the quality of the people that you've got. But um, yeah, we're really lucky in terms of our like some of the stuff in the prelim is around resourcing, but I've never worked in a school that's as well resourced as this one, and that's
mm,
mostly to do with our demographic. Like, I haven't really mentioned that we've got about 440 odd kids at the moment, and about 61% of those are Indigenous kids. So we probably have more Aboriginal kids in our school than any other school in Western New South Wales, aside from one of the high schools in Dubbo College. So we've got 300 Indigenous kids at our school, and so that does bring aspects of the resources that we have. So I don't, my school gives you a pretty accurate sort of thing there, but we have more SLSOs at our school than we have teachers. So um, we've we employ 11 more SLSOs than we would as a base school, but we also employ 6 more teachers. So the resource that we get is really mostly built around the human resource and the difference that can make, and creating time for that. And then um, we also, for a long time, we've employed our own speech therapist, and over the last couple of years, we've employed a psychologist to look at a whole lot of things to do with like the trauma that we've sort of identified through
mm.
our data. So I suppose I describe myself most days as like it's a bit like Santa Claus, because if you're running a school and you don't really have to say no real often, it
Mm,
does make it a little bit easier. But yeah, you'd have to talk to other people around that. But I think it's
mm,
mostly I don't really take a lot of things to heart. I I'm not the most planned person in the world, so that creates stress for
Really?
other people besides me, probably. Um, but I think having really open conversations with people around
Mm,
what's going to happen and what's needed. Um, and one of the things I've really prided myself on is I'm not worried about, like, even when the Department of Education was saying you can't go and knock on the doors of people because it's a safety issue and all that sort of stuff. Um, Ever since I first started, I've always gone and probably visited our most complex families, and had one-on-one and I'm comfortable with that. Like at the moment,
mm,
one of my most enjoyable days is when I go to, I was a touch judge at the rugby in Wellington on the weekend. So all these people are coming up to me, sort of saying, hi, it's good to see you here. So getting to see people in other contexts has been positive as well. And that's been good because we're sort of started to tip the balance, because there are actually 2 other schools in town. So there's a Christian school and a Catholic school. And in the last 6 months, we've had 10 families bring their kids from those schools to our school because of what they've heard and what they've seen, and that's translating. Like, one of our really big focuses is around preschool to kinder transition. So obviously at the moment, my kinder teachers go out with different coloured teddy bears and they visit the preschool, and they invite all the kids, doesn't matter which school they're going to come along to our big school excursion. So those kids come in. We go around and pick them up in our school bus and bring them in, and they spend about 2 or 3 hours at school and get to meet the teachers and all that sort of stuff. So um, yeah, it's not yeah. I really enjoy the aspect of being a leader, like, because like I love my sport, so I sort of, like, I've never been to a primary principals conference, or the only one I've been to is the one that Wayne Bennett spoke at, because I wanted to go and see him. So I suppose I sort of take a lot of that people management and stuff from a lot of sports things that I've read and done, and I think it's mostly about that. It's around managing. If you manage people well, it does take a lot of pressure off you as the leader.
Beautiful. So I'm going to steer us back into our topic of but thank you, because it was a curiosity, and thank you for answering that question. So my question is sort of, when you're implementing Life Skills Go and you're bringing in a whole school approach to wellbeing and real-time data, how did you ensure that it wasn't just a leadership direction, but rather that you brought the whole school and community on board?
Yeah, I think we've still got a little bit of a way to go with community, but one of the, again, linking back to just the structure of the way our school works, my APs have a really good relationship with each of their teams. So I think when we were starting to talk about what we were going to do with Life Skills Go, it sort of lined up with a few other things. So integrating it into everything that happens, I think, is the key. So it provides a lot of feedback and immediacy to those things. So um, we've also worked really hard. At the moment, our attendance data is hovering between 87 and 90%, which in our context
Mm.
is pretty amazing. So one of the things we've been using the data for is that we have a bus pickup. So we've got a 25-seater school bus. So it goes around and it does 2 runs around town and picks up about 50 kids on any given morning. So that, if you start doing the math, we were sort of hovering around 84 to 85%. So those 50 kids are that extra 5% of kids that were knocking our data around, if you want to look at that way a bit. We also have a breakfast program, so we feed probably about 80 kids every morning. So that's sort of linked into that. And then this year we made a decision to take one of our teachers offline to create a wellbeing space. So Anne, who is driving that, is really now that's her role, is to look at that data and see where kids are at with their check-in, and then she goes and touches base with them. I'd be interested, in terms of feedback from people who listen to this,
Mm.
because wellbeing hubs or rooms or whatever are sort of the flavor of the month at the moment. But in a primary school context, I'm just not too sure whether that works as well. I think having various sorts of places around the school is better. I think in a high school context where kids can come and have time out and all that sort of stuff. But we've looked and listened to, like, Mudgee Public have a really good wellbeing sort of setup, and we're sort of modeling some of the stuff we do off them. We also, for a while, have employed an SLSO who, when I was doing another job, the local Uniting ran an in-school family referral process. So we actually pay for someone from Uniting to work in our school 2 days a week, and she works with one of our other SLSOs, and they're looking at the attendance data, and that's guiding whether they go and visit people. So we have people out in community and visiting families every day, but especially on the Thursday and Friday at the end of the week, we have them going out with targeted things. Kim, who's the lady from Uniting, whenever she's doing a really good job, because I get phone calls from families telling me to stop sending that DCJ person around to visit me. But Kim's great. She's a much better straight shooter than me, so they have really honest conversations with families around various things that are happening. And then another program we've implemented over the last bit of time is Bounce Back. So we've employed a psychologist, an independent psychologist, for a while, and they have been working individually with kids and families around mostly around their trauma history and how we can sort of support them with that. But she is a trained facilitator in Bounce Back, so she has now trained 15 of our SLSOs up, and they run smaller groups of between 5 and 10 kids that are, again, working with our data, and hopefully we're sort of not into that for too long, but hopefully that will start to see a bit of a shift in terms of some of that check-in data, and we're actually looking at working with some of the work that you guys are doing, where we can do a bit more surveying and more in-depth analysis of the impact that a program like that might be having. So that's just sort of a bit of a snapshot about where the data is sort of helping us.
And, I think when I hear of all these initiatives and I think about, it is a really proactive approach that you've got, and you've got, incredible people going out, you've got buses, you've got programs. Can you share sort of, has there been moments where real-time data has allowed you to intervene in something that you wouldn't have known before?
Oh, definitely. Uh, um, I think since Anne's taken on her role in terms of being that sort of well-being person, we have gone a bit deep. Like the pointy end kids often dominate your focus. So I think some of those families that we haven't traditionally had a focus on um, have sort of come to the fore a bit, and being more proactive and getting into that early, I think has been really useful. I'm just struggling to think about a specific example, but um, again, in a similar way to you guys have been doing, we've been working with Royal Far West and some other people. So I know there's one young fellow there who we probably didn't really have a good idea around, but have uncovered a whole lot of health issues to him. Like he's a bigger boy, and those sorts of things. But we've sort of found out a whole lot of other stuff that's happening at home that we probably didn't know about before all that started happening. Um, so I don't know if I'm as in depth around the answer as I probably need to be.
That's okay. No, that's fine. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, one of, with all of the, particularly being a rural school and with complex, being able to have that data to be able to identify or be able to, look at where you need to be able to put your efforts. I suppose, and this might not be within your role, but I'd love to know how you're using the dashboards or reports, not only for immediate intervention, but also to inform you of what might be needed.
Yeah, well, I think that's where we have a pretty strong learning and support team, and Anne at the moment's providing a feedback loop around that into our learning and support
Mhm.
sort of roles. So, um, like I copied out a bit here because I was just looking at it's funny because it sort of tells you data about the obvious. So Mrs. Morley's one of my APs, but she regularly has 100% of her kids ready to learn. And um, she's a really good case in point, which is probably a little bit before the data, but she was actually the stage 3 AP. So she was the AP for years 5 and 6. And we're really struggling with some issues in terms of kinder through to stage 1 transition. So Carolyn 5 years ago, I asked her, I said, Will you please come down and start working with stage 1, which is a big challenge for people. But um, since she's moved to stage 1, um, aside from the big jump we had with having our preschool, that kinder to year 1 transition and integrating a whole lot of things to do with lit and one-on-one intervention has really our year 3 and this year's year 5 NAPLAN data, like the graphs are just heading towards state, and see that 4 or 5 years since she took over there and got things really taking off, is really good. And then the kids, the stage 1 data for our kids is the best it's ever been, just around well-being and from an academic point of view. So. And I think that's powerful because one of the great strengths of the check-in is that it does allow you to get data off younger kids that mightn't have been as forthcoming with how they were feeling and that sort of stuff, and creating that comfortable routine. And see, they're still at that age where they're still going up to the smart board and tapping on it happily to say that
Yeah.
they are good to be here, whereas the older kids sort of are going, "Oh, right, what's all
Mm,
this about?" So. I'm really looking forward to see how that routine, as it moves from the younger kids and them being comfortable and honest about their
mm.
opinions, translates through to the older kids. So I think,
I think
and we're still early into it, but um, yeah, we've had no, like I just downloaded the last 2 weeks just so I had a bit of a visual with no kids in the red, and obviously the large, 70, well, from the data I took 76 kids in the green. So, and like 84% of our kids are ready to learn. So, um, that, um, yeah, that then allows us to probably focus on some of that other stuff, which to be honest, we are still really working on and looking at, learning from ways and see the visit you guys had, I think's taken it to a new level because Nikki laughs at me and I'm not the yoga sort of guy, but um, I think what our guys gleaned from working with your team is that some of like a lot of those activities when they're integrated in are going to support us even more.
mm,
And when you've got a diverse team, there's people who are really into that, and they're sort of saying, "See, Darryl, if we start, I've been telling you for ages, if we start doing this, it'll do this." So, um, and I suppose that's what I like. I like to be challenged. Like I'm happy to be questioned and challenged about that stuff. So,
I think there's something really interesting, and because when I hear you talk about the readiness to learn, the relationship to the teacher, the joy of the young people turning up in a state of readiness to learn, and then the outcomes of the academics, it's not by accident. We always say this check-in is a way for young people not only to use their voice, but also to, learn those foundational emotional literacy skills and to be seen by their teachers and to be seen in a different way so that we've got, not only are they using their student voice, well, not only are they using their voice, but also when you shared about that teacher coming into stage one, that I felt the joy of, her connection, them checking in, feeling really excited to be at school, her knowing the students, and then you're talking
mhm,
about the improvement in academics. We also know that young people can't learn from people they don't trust. So it all,
mhm,
we started off by how do we create classrooms where young people are able to feel like they're seen? And we know from a child development point of view that when we create that connection or we see them or we even just validate how they are, they want to come. So they've got that sense of belonging. They're also more willing to learn from someone and they're listening to the information. And this is not Nikki just rambling. This is research that's coming off. And it makes me smile because I know you from visiting your school and I know your love of sport and I know the peace, love, and mung beans about some of the well-being aspects that we can laugh about. But I also saw your community and your young people embrace them fully. And it was
yep,
wonderful seeing, I think, you as a leader to see different aspects that could be brought in very small pieces into a culture that brought more connection and more trust and more tools to be able to transition that culture across the whole school. And I'm smiling because, I got to witness that transformation and I got to witness you watching them and hearing the young
mm,
people and also seeing it's not just something that happens in isolation. Well-being, it's across your whole school, it's across all facets. And I think that just made me really, really smile. And I suppose, when I'd love to hear more around the what next. You were talking about planning lessons, and I'd love to
yep.
hear, yeah, what's happening there.
Well, that was exciting today because at our staff meeting today, we're planning for the new PDHPE syllabus. So each of the stages have sort of mapped the syllabus outcomes and looked at, the various people that we access and things that we can use. But it was exciting to see, um, and I knew I should have written these down, but the first two strands of the syllabus just fit almost perfectly in with what life
Mhm.
skills go. And they had A3 sheets with all of the outcomes basically highlighted and said this relates to life skills go. They had your mapping tools out, and they're excited. We're talking earlier about how it's now all lined up, all the hard work your guys have put in to line it up with the new document. Um, and my question always is, well, is this going to save you time? Is this going to and it turned into a really good conversation because we have some guys come from a soccer organization, John Moriarty. So, um, and they obviously deal with a lot of the physical activity stuff, which your thing's a little bit different. So we actually started talking about what life skills go can do to support us, but also how we can work with these guys who come in and do a lot of this stuff that well, the kids spend an hour with them on a Friday, so that takes away from some of the teaching time. So we started talking about with how our teachers could talk with these guys and look at some of the syllabus outcomes because um, whenever you're developing syllabuses from, or whenever you're developing teaching units from the curriculum docs, it's really about how you can integrate that in to save time because we don't want it all to be adding on
Mm,
and so that's I think goes right back to your first questions is I'm seeing life skills go just being integrated in and that's useful at the moment because I think we can keep having conversations with you guys about where our gaps are, where we're
mm.
finding issues with developing what approaches and ways of delivering aspects of the curriculum. So I think that'll continue for us to be a two-way street, and just seeing the excitement of the staff being able to, and obviously having the resources that you've got available for them to access to save them time, and I'm sure we'll be talking with you guys about where we are seeing needs that exist. So
Mm.
it'll create that whole ability to just keep integrating it into what we're doing.
And I think that's something that we often don't touch on in this webinar, in these webinars, is that we have a whole suite of social emotional learning lessons, digital lessons that can
Yep.
be, distributed out to individual students, to small groups that you can begin to look at, particularly on those stage reports and when they're working in the stages, if there are young people that have got social skills issues or needing more resilience, and that flexibility to be able to work at each of the stages to align them, assign them, and then send them out. And I think that's probably something we as a company haven't done that well, kind of talking that much about. That's where we started 18 years ago, is delivering social emotional learning programs into schools. And
Yep.
just for kind of a bit of context for those people on the webinar this evening, one of the things, we'd been delivering these programs into schools for a very long time across probably about 800 schools. And I had this silly moment that probably changed the course of the company, where I used to say to schools, how are you measuring the impact of our programs? Like, there's one thing about, we used to go in and deliver them face to face. And, how are you measuring the impact? How are you seeing that it's been embedded? There's one thing to tick a sort of a syllabus outcome or a curriculum outcome, but what's been the benefit of bringing programs in? And I really saw that across a lot of wellbeing programs, that often schools will reach for a wellbeing program and think it's going to work, and yet there weren't those sort of tools to be able to, first and foremost, what's the baseline data? Where are we drawing from to really say, yes, this cohort needs this, or this stage needs this? And then to be able to measure, once that's been implemented, how do we measure the impact of that? And so a whole lot of schools that I was asking these questions to said, well, we can't, we don't have the tools. And that's really where Life Skills Go was born out of, was first and foremost, how do we really get the ability to look at what a school needs, what's that baseline data, and hence why we start with the emotion check-in. And I think we're probably the only provider on the market that often says, go slow, be deliberate, don't rush, just make sure that, getting your check-ins, embedded into each classroom, minimum of 3 times a week, get the habit so that you've got consistent, reliable data, and then begin to evaluate where you're taking lessons or you're taking that social emotional learning responses in. And it's kind of foreign, like when you think about, often the scope and sequences, or the set and forgets. And one of the big things that I'd say is, we have amazing digital resources that have been developed, that have gone through, QA and evidence base and all of those things. But until we've got that data, it's really, we always say to schools, slow down. So you're at this really nice point right now where you're getting the habits, the check-ins are happening. Then when you begin to bring in the lessons, or you begin to bring in what's changing, and then you can evaluate what's changing. Is it working? Is it not working? And I think that's a part in the webinars we often forget, is that, we do have hundreds of evidence-based, stage-based, curriculum-aligned lessons for social emotional learning. And that's our sort of bread and butter, where we started. And so it's great to see, it's great to hear your team looking at those and getting excited because they're easy to deliver. They're really easy for them to also collect the reporting on them. For you as an executive, who delivered the lessons? Were they delivered across the classes? What were the outcomes? It's all done for you, and it takes a lot of time and effort out. But also you have that consistency across the whole school as well. And I think
Yep.
it just made me smile. I hadn't thought about that for I hadn't thought about that for quite a long time. So, in what do you believe, or why do you believe access to real-time whole school wellbeing data is no longer optional, but it's essential, particularly for, regional schools?
Um, well, I just think it's another part of your armory in terms of being on top of what things are happening. So I think the check-in's one part of it, but I'm really excited about how we can start asking some more individual type questions, or doing a little bit of surveying, which drills down into, like I was sharing with Nikki some of the data we got from state just around where we're heading in, like the survey that New South Wales did was all around like explicit teaching, effective feedback, all those sorts of things. So um, we rank really highly in that, but that data doesn't have the ability to drill down. So what I'd be really looking forward to in working with you guys around is how we can start to drill down into some, or have some of those conversations. And I
Are
know,
you are you in that session tomorrow morning, Daryl?
I'll
Are
be
you
here
in
at
the?
8 o'clock
I know. There we
if I
go.
haven't got any voice. No. Yeah.
You'll
So
have all your questions answered.
yeah.
But to that point, I think you've just stolen our thunder on our new feature. I'm joking, but I think being able to, there's one thing to have the data and then to be able to drill down. And as I can say, a huge big thank you to you and your school for working with us on that. I think you're right. Being able to have, for example, if I've got tired students constantly, how do I survey them to find out what's really going on? How can we then
Mm.
have more targeted resources? If we have anxious students, how do we begin to, have those surveys put in? And we're really excited to be launching that next term. That's incredibly something that we're really, really looking forward to. I can't believe it's nearly time to go. I have one more question for you. If you could give one piece of advice to other school leaders beginning their preventative and proactive wellbeing journey, what would it be?
The number one
Oh,
thing is
oh, wait a minute. I'm going to put a caveat around it. It has to be in one sentence, Daryl.
one sentence.
Oh, there we go. I'm mean.
Listen to your community, support your staff, and make sure that everything you do is focused around the kids and
Mm.
outcomes for kids.
I love that. You did it. Oh my gosh, you get a gold star, Mr. Principal Daryl. But I think, it's interesting. We were working with a cluster of schools similar to yours, but in another place today. And one of the biggest things that stood out in the schools that had implemented it and really just were off and running really quickly, and the feedback that stood out was when they were introducing it, they took time to make sure that everyone knew the why. Students, we want to know how you are. We just want to know how you are. The
Yep.
teachers, this is going to give you the ability to be able to walk into your room and to be able to first thing in the morning, like how many times you and I, Daryl, have we been asked, classroom management skills, these kind of things, to be able to walk in, have young people express how they're feeling, no extra work for the teachers, and then for teachers to be able to see what percentage of readiness to learn is here in this classroom and who might I need to maybe keep an eye on,
Mhm.
check in with first thing in the morning. 2 minutes, not even 2 seconds, to be able to have a look at that data. The schools that had done that and then had a line list in their executive meeting, however often they wanted, if it's once a fortnight, and then their learning support team to be looking at the automated generated reports and the triangulated reports, those that had those and had that consistency were just in terms of being able to implement it really, really well and have it as part of the fabric of the school. It was just so seamless. And I think you touched on that really beautifully, that we need to take our students, our teachers, and our whole staff on a journey and also let them know that the system itself will do this. There's a lot of experts that have built out all these data rules. It's not something we need to run out. It's something that's going to be lifted, and it's something that we can begin to work with in a timely manner, and that the teachers don't have to run at all of this. It's done for them.
Beautiful.
Um, I just want to thank you once again. I just, I have a very big soft spot for your school. I'm definitely going to be coming out there again soon. It's such a unique place. Like, it's just, if anyone ever gets a chance to pop out to Wellington, make sure you pop in and see Principal Darryl. But I think I have an absolute love for, regional and remote schools. And I think the amount of work and the amount of roles that you and all of your team do every day is incredibly inspiring. And I'm going to also just be a little bit selfish here, but I love that your passion and your commitment to the young people, like that shone through. I started off this session by saying I've had the privilege of witnessing that, but your tireless commitment and every one of your team, like there's an absolute
Yep.
commitment in your school that shines through from the minute that you walk in. So if people do have an opportunity to pop out there, it really is something. There's a lot happening. Even I was like, oh, I've seen it all in my 20 years of teaching. I was like, some moments were like, wow, that was a lot. Now there's questions coming through. Beautiful. Do you use any other social emotional learning programs to support Life Skills Go?
Um, we have a range of programs in place. I don't know if I'm really looking how we complement that. We did use another program which I was asking the staff around today. Positive Living Skills was someone we were working with before, but yeah, not specific programs, whole school ones. But that I think that's definitely somewhere we need to go after having the visit from your guys and how we can integrate that into our data.
Mm. And we also need to get the our friend Dr. Barrett to. I have something up my sleeve for you. That's a great question.
Yep.
Emily, thank you so much for that. Just if you get a chance, we'd be really grateful. You should just pop the survey into the chat. If you can, it's just a couple of questions. If there's something that you'd really like to know, or, the working group today or the Costa group, one of the things that they came back from was they wanted to have someone that has been working with Life Skills Go for a couple of years run a session on how they manage first thing in the day, how they're using the dashboards to be preventative, and that was something that really came up. So we're going to go and get
Yep.
one of our deputies from one of the areas to run a session for them. So again, if you are a current Life Skills Go customer and there's things that we can do, as Darryl said, we also run support. So if you wanted to host something in your school and run a session there's a lot of schools in New South Wales now using it. We're happy to come and send a staff member out there and support. Oh, Baba! Oh, hey, Dee, there's beautiful Dee. Beautiful Dee. Sorry, I haven't seen Dee for ages. Hello. Oh, I didn't even look at the attendees this evening. I just want to say, wishing you all a wonderful evening. I'm going to let you go free, Mr. Darryl. You're amazing, and thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who jumped in this evening. If there's anything else that we can do to support you, please pop it in the survey. We'd love to hear. And Darryl, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock so that we've got the final reveal of all of our survey work that you and a whole lot of working groups have been working on. I hope that I hope that it works, and I hope that it really helps your school. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Darryl, take care.
Thanks, guys. Ta.
Thank you.